Kelly. I work with Last Call Media. We do Drupal website and design, and sometimes we build products for people. How many people in here have done some sort of project management on a project? What about, did you guys know that Angie has a session right now? Well, so how many people typically do mostly development on a project? Okay. What about like site building? Some site builders. All right.
What is a site builder?
Yeah, what is it? Yeah, what is a site builder? What do you think?
I'm a developer, so I'm friends.
Anybody that does site building, how do you think of yourself as a site builder?
Quick and quick.
Like configuring Drupal with what it kind of provides and putting the Legos together, maybe?
Like filling in the content on the website, or?
No, actually.
Huge content type fields.
Yeah, so Drupal is developed in a way that it allows you to build it with itself. So it can use its own tools to build more of itself. That was, for me, really the thing that drew me right into it as soon as I discovered it's called CCK, which is custom fields, and I discovered that and views, and suddenly I felt like I could make this website do any sort of thing I wanted to do.
Yeah, I did some stuff like chaos back in Drupal 6.
Yeah.
It's tools or something like that.
Well, you needed to have that. That was a requirement for views. Okay, cool. So we're gonna need all of those hats on to think about how this session could be better and more informative. So really, actually, I want to start with. So we've got some developers in the room. We've got some project management folks. We've got some site builders in the room. What about? Has anybody done any like work with their customer, or had to think about what their customer's going through and the product that their customers receiving? Are there any customers or operators of a Drupal website here today? Okay. So a lot of times, probably one of the most common groups of people I think of, because Last Call does a lot of websites for universities. You build this site, and then the people, some group of people in the department, they may have to use the website to get information out. They become the customers of a product that you built. You built this product for them to communicate with their audience, and so you now have a relationship with them through your product. So one of the things we've been talking about is kind of the different things that people focus on in the room. So we have a couple of project management people. We've got a couple of site builders. We've got a bunch of developers. Where do you guys tend to focus? Content management. So site building, or like you're operators of a Drupal website?
Well, it's sustainment purposes, so updating content on like a daily basis.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you guys are using this tool that someone's developed.
Exactly.
Right. So someone has implemented Drupal in a certain way so that you can use it, and your success depends on how well that's been implemented.
Right.
Perfect. Awesome. So, does anybody know what DevOps is? Somebody want to talk about DevOps? You.
Everybody, it's another one of those words where it means something different than everybody else.
Right.
For me, DevOps is, the operations of how am I doing my local, how do I move that stuff to the stage, how does that get off to production, all the tooling involved.
Yep. So that's kind of the dev part. What can you talk about any of the ops part?
Well, do you mean the workflow of committing, testing, being executed on staging, all of that jazz.
Well, those are all DevOps things. Does anybody have anything to add to that when they think of DevOps?
Server config, DNSs, SSL key configurations, all the kind of more infrastructure-y things that go along with making the website get delivered. Because from developers, they're working in kind of a incubator. And once you get into a production environment, there's a lot of other things that get touched.
Yeah. So I find that the most common way for people to think of DevOps is very much on the dev side of it, and we're making it. We're looking. Actually, I have a slide here. So frequent, rapid release cycle. Right. We want to get better at releasing. We want our releases to be smaller and less painful or painless if possible, automating as much as possible. And we want to do that so that we can release more frequently and more safely, because a smaller release is a safer release versus one that there's a ton of stuff and now you have this big, you have to birth this big new thing of tons of features, and it's very risky. And when your releases are large and risky, you do them less often, and your customers are getting your work less often. And so this aspect of DevOps is meant to get functionality updates out to your customers faster so that they're happier, right? So that's part of that. And part of that comes with automated deployments and automated rollbacks, really just removing the fear of releasing new work. You want, as you come up with ideas, you want to be able to develop them quickly, break that work down and have it flow through. A lot of people use Kanban boards to flow all the way out through release, and you don't want anything slowing that down. So that's something about DevOps that I think everybody tends to think of. Continuous integration with automated testing. This is, you have a team of people developing stuff, and they're all committing their work into a central repository that is there's an automation that detects that, integrates it all in together, and this is an opportunity to run tests on everything and catch those problems before they get out into the wild. You should basically automate everything where possible. Look for to follow through with this thinking, anything that you can automate, you need to automate, and you need to test as much as possible, and you need to really make delivery as risk-free as possible so that it can happen as easily as possible and as frequently as possible. So there's a lot of focus in DevOps on really what could amount to a fire hose of features on users, right? We've got our system, we've automated everything, we're just coming up with ideas, we're developing them, we're just blasting them out at people frequently and quickly and easily. A lot of problems have been solved there, and it's a really beautiful thing to see a well-functioning, automated, continuous integration, continuous delivery model happening. You also want to build in feedback mechanisms, and the most common way that people think of these feedback mechanisms would be like different server monitoring, so that you know before the customer does if something went wrong. If you deploy something to production and something goes wrong, you know before many people have seen it that there's a problem and you can fix it quickly. Right? So you're getting that feedback from what I think people would think of as their work operating out there in the wild. So the servers are operating like a machine runs, the different elements of your infrastructure is operating in a sense, and you need to monitor that so that you can make sure that it's operating as smoothly as possible. So that's a lot of, I think, that whole picture is really the most common way when people think of DevOps. Yeah, we've got the development part and get our stuff out quickly, and we monitor it as it operates, and we get that feedback, and we can fix stuff very quickly. I think DevOps is more than that. So, and actually DevOps is more than that, right? So DevOps is this idea of taking the development teams that are developing a product or a tool or something, and the operators, the operations team, the people who are operating the product, the people who are either the customers or the responsible representing the customers of this product and operation, and getting the development team, the operations team, as close together as possible. All right, so there's shortening that feedback loop. So it's still in line with this idea of getting stuff out as quickly as possible and as painlessly as possible, but you also want to do more than just get monitoring of your systems in operation. You want to be getting more feedback than that. You want to be getting feedback from the people operating your software, from how your software is operating, how your software could improve. So there are a lot more feedback mechanisms to put in place than just ones that ping servers or monitor for uptime. So we can think about, if we expand this idea, this feedback loop of what is DevOps, if we expand it out to cover more of the software as a product in operation with the people operating it, we can think about ways to put in additional feedback mechanisms that will help us improve our product even further. So just to finish this idea of DevOps, you've got developers, testers, operation engineers working together. You've got all of those people understanding what the business goal is of this whole thing. So you've got this whole value chain, right? It's not, the value chain isn't just our features get out and there's the value. The value chain is our features get out, people use them, people validate that these features in this product makes them successful, or you find out where your product could be better. And since you've got this beautifully automated DevOps infrastructure, you can get that feedback very quickly and make those changes very quickly. Because we're working in software is flexible, software is easy to change, and when something's easy to change, you just want to get that, you just want to know, right? You might have the code up right in front of you, and you can change it very quickly. If somebody would just tell you what would make it better, you could change it, you could commit it, and right out it goes. So, so the team in DevOps, the team has to have the authority to make those changes and implement them quickly, right? So you can't be bogged down with, well, we're going to have to run this by our manager if we can make this change, right? It's really looking at all the different ways that we can empower people to give that feedback, get that feedback, make those changes, and complete the delivery loop. Let's see. Yeah. So if we take this further and we think about our customer operating our product, our operations team, depending on what the product is, it's going to determine who's the operator of the product. So if we think about them and we think about what additional feedback mechanisms can we put in place to get feedback from them, that's really where we're going to get that continuous improvement that DevOps is really striving for. So if you don't think of DevOps as covering that more of the operations stuff, then you could just automate 100% of everything, and it's all one button. And then how are you going to continuously improve your product? That narrow version of DevOps loses a lot of continuous improvement opportunity that you would get from your customers who are using the product and thinking of things that you might not ever think of otherwise. So some DevOps measures of success. A lot of times I think we just think of delivering more faster. How do we do that? But what I want to think about in this talk is using Drupal as part of a DevOps feedback loop to determine if we're delivering the right things as a measure of success, and having customer satisfaction be a measure of success for our DevOps operation. So DevOps, when you dig into it a little bit, is a lot of really cool thinking on breaking down the development operations barrier. We've got this feedback, this loop here, right? And a lot of it we're very familiar with. We plan to do something, we build it, we continuously improve this stuff over and over and over over. It's very beautiful to see, and it continuously integrates and it deploys, and we've automated a lot of that stuff. We've made that very painless. And then there's this part that I'm talking about as if it's something that we need to consider focusing on a little bit more, is the product goes into operation and we get continuous feedback. If we're not considering our customers, this continuous feedback is uptime monitoring, different server operation monitoring tools. But if we bring our customer into this idea and our operations team more into this idea and think of them operating, then that should help us think or look for additional feedback mechanisms to put in place. If we've developed our product, if it's Drupal that we're building and deploying and is going into operation, this talk is really thinking about Drupal at this point in this loopy thing here. All right. So does anybody think about Drupal this way? Does anybody think about how can you communicate with the people using Drupal a little bit? Does anybody feel like this is a part that nobody thinks about?
I've never thought about it in context of using Drupal to get the feedback. We get feedback via customers file tickets and things in JIRA.
Right.
I never considered using Drupal for it.
Right. When I was thinking about talking about this aspect of things as being valuable, I was running the idea by some people who are really into DevOps, and I was like, oh well, what do you think of like this part of DevOps? And they're like, no, DevOps is this other thing about automation and delivery and continuous integration and very technical stuff that's very exciting and very interesting. And I was like, well, but how do you get the feedback from people in operations? And they were like, that just happens. When something breaks, people tell you. So and this relates to a work I'm doing on a project, and you'll probably tell by some of the slides because I threw this presentation together this morning. And some of the slides will look like they don't fit, and that's because they're slides from other mini presentations that I did as part of other work that relates to this. So this has been on my mind, and thinking about that's a spot where we can do better, where you don't just say, hey, let us know what problem, what breaks, let us know. Here's the URL to our ticketing system. I want to think about different ways to use Drupal to say, hey, was this page useful? Or to say, hey, did you know you can do this with this page? Help them understand their product better so that they're misusing it less. So here's one of those slides from a different presentation. But if we can think about one of the measures of success of DevOps as customer satisfaction, we need to think about customer satisfaction. So for our projects, we can have a long-term goal that our customers are satisfied, successful users of our product because they have and use efficient, reliable support mechanisms. So they're using it's a living relationship. I think it's very unusual now that you would develop a software product and deliver it, and then that would just be the end of it, right? You now have a relationship with your users, and they need to feel successful, or they're going to look for a different product. I think a lot of times this is one of those places where a lot of customers tend to feel like WordPress is taking care of them better, that they're more successful with WordPress. One of a painful thing for me to hear is when we're pitching for a product that Drupal just seems like a perfect fit, and there's somebody, head of marketing that just wants WordPress because it just feels like it's more reliable. It makes more sense to them. There's something about how the back end of WordPress works that the users feel like they're more able to use it correctly. And I think this is a place where you can make Drupal be this way, but it's not going to make those decisions for you as developers. So oftentimes I find due to budget, there's just not the budget to configure that part of the product to be as pleasurable to use. But customer satisfaction really depends on their experience, the customer experience. And our customer satisfaction depends on standard reliable support, both coming from, I think, the way the product is intuitive to use, and then also the way that they can get in touch with people that need to further configure or customize the product to make it better. Customer satisfaction, you need to feel heard, right? You need to feel that you're reporting these bugs, they're understood, and also to keep reporting those bugs, you need to know that your time is not being wasted. So that's where something like release notes or informing your customer of updates or bugs that you fixed. You probably have seen this in a lot of products you use. You log in and you get what's new. And it could be like, here's a new thing that people have been reporting for a while. Hey, a lot of times in your app updates, you'll hear something like, hey, we listened and we fixed these bugs. So this is happening all over the place in products. These are not new ideas, but I think that we can think about how we can bring this into Drupal. And that's also part of a lot of the exchanging ideas and knowledge with your customers. They're using it, they're going to get ideas. If you can figure out ways to say, hey, if you see where this could be better, say where it could be better, because we can change it easily and deploy it very quickly. So to make that less of a hurdle, to remove a barrier to get those ideas. I think also though, I think a lot of times there's a little mental hurdle that we need to overcome where these ideas are not seen in the right light, where it could be like, if you could just stop reporting things, this thing was perfect when I shipped it to you, and it didn't have any problems, and it wouldn't have any problems if you would just stop reporting problems. So I think a lot of times we feel that way. But I think so. One of the things that we would need to align ourselves with and agree with a little bit more is that we want our product to continuously improve, and it's easy to improve. And a lot of times, budget is a blocker to this, right? Because you just don't have like a blank check to keep improving your product. But where you have the resources and where you can get funding to improve your product, you want to improve that product, and that means you need to crave this feedback, these ideas, whether they turn out to be user error or whether they end up not making sense. You've got to crave this to get the good ideas to improve your product. Because at some point, if you are continuously improving your product, it gets harder and harder to improve your product. It gets hard. If you want to keep continuously improving, you need to keep looking harder for these improvements. So the customer satisfaction feedback loop, and I sometimes change my mind on where I would start talking about this. I actually think I'd like to start at number 2, but the slides don't do that, where as much as you can, where possible, build in self-help systems into your product. Drupal is great at this. Drupal has help text all over the place. You could have help pages as a content type. As much as you can build in self-help and teaching your customer about how your product works, the more they'll be able to use that product better, be more successful with that product, understand that product, and give you more meaningful feedback. So if you're not helping them help themselves and helping them understand what they're using, if you're not doing that, that's increasing the likelihood that you're going to get bad and annoying feedback, where you think like, oh, well, of course you think that this could be better, you're not using it right. But really that's because they haven't been told how to use it right. A lot of times, I think in web projects, there's like maybe a day of training, or there might be documentation if you have someone on your team that can do that, can get that done. But I think there are ways that we can think about using Drupal to contextually inform our users on how they might use the product better. There's some out-of-the-box stuff, and then there's some ideas that we're working on as part of a couple projects to make it better. But anybody in here that does any development, I think, could implement it pretty quickly on your project as well. Ticketing system, not going to talk about too much integrating Drupal in with something like that, but that's possible. So when they can't help themselves, they need an easy way, and those easy ways can be built into Drupal to say like, hey, are you still having a problem, right? So like, they should have ways to help themselves, but if they can't, if they run out of help for themselves to get, they should have an easy way to then be kicked off to your ticketing system. Or your feedback, it could be your feedback system, could be one and the same. Really, Drupal is very relational. Everything can be very connected and very contextual. And so you can put in very relevant help, but also very relevant redirections to get more help. If you do this reliably throughout the system, you start to generate this system of reliable support. That's not going to be so much in these slides, and I didn't quite get to feature requests, but you can see if there's a good feedback mechanism when they can't help themselves, and they can reliably send that to you as a team. You can then prioritize these into feature requests, and when you develop them through your beautiful DevOps system of automation and deliver it out, then you can use Drupal to say, what's new? What was just released? Here's a tour of this feature. Here's how to use this new thing. Here's a bug that was reported. People couldn't help themselves, and they used our ticketing system and our reliable support mechanisms, and we can use Drupal to explain, here's a new feature that was generated by the operators of our product. And then, of course, that would get documented and added to the SelfHelp system. So, to start with communicating what's new and what's fixed in each delivery, one of the ways that comes, has anybody used the tours module? No, the tour is in Drupal 8 core, and it's been in there for a really, really long time. And it's not a widely used module at all, and it's almost like 90% done. And actually, when I was looking into Tor, one of the things that you can do with Tor is auto start tours or link into other tours at a specific tour tip. How many people have taken tours on other products? Yeah, right. So it points to something on the page, and you click next. Something else points to something else on the page, says some stuff, and you click next, that kind of thing. So those would be like tour tips. So you can link to other, you can link into other tips, so you can connect tours together with other tours. And I found the Drupal.org ticket where that feature got developed. And it was like a classic Drupal issue where it started out as, hey, we should have, to improve the user experience when they first install Drupal, we should have on that front page that, often criticized as useless front page that you land on, we should have a tour that takes people through all of Drupal, right? You just install Drupal, click next through all the different pieces. And so that would be really cool. That would be a lot of content, a lot of explaining, a lot of self-help. So can you imagine if you're somebody who just installed Drupal and, ooh, I'm going to take a tour, and now I'm looking through views, and here are all the things that views are about. This is kind of overwhelming, but here are my content types. And so the idea was all of this tour and tour tip content that went all across Drupal. That was where that was how that issue started. And so the first piece of functionality that needed to be implemented was the ability to auto-start tours and to link to other tours. So after a little bit of a back and forth, the issue title got changed to ability to link to other tours. That feature got implemented, and the ticket got closed. The issue got closed as resolved. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, can you do that based on roles and things?
Roles?
Yeah, like if the first time a person has role X, can you auto start a particular tour for them, or is it just?
Well, so the way that you would do that out of the box would be a little bit more like piecing things together, because with rules or something, you can detect those things, and then you could redirect them to a page that has a tour on it that kind of like auto starts that tour. But out of the box, tour doesn't have a UI. There is a tour UI module. It's probably 75% complete, and I could show some of that. But right, so out of the box, tour is going to be configured by YAML files.
Cool.
And it's not unreasonable to do it that way. But I think that it has a lot of potential, and I think nobody's really advancing that potential because we're not really thinking about the value in connecting with the users of our products in the ways that I've been talking about. Let's see. So this is from another slide deck that I did for a project. And using the tour module considers the author journey, and tour is a training tool. And we can also consider designing new tours and how to update them, how to build creating tours into our development of new features. Because if we don't do that, if we leave tours off to a last step, the same way that like documentation gets left off to a last step, we'll never do it. So we need to think about, as we're developing our features, how do we build that into the acceptance criteria? Like, okay, this new feature could use a tour tip as part of this other tour that exists. So let's include this little chunk of YAML in with our code that gets deployed with this, and then the tour, whatever tour is updated with that content. So let's see, what do we got? So tours can be triggered to start automatically just by adding $tour to the end of the URL. This means you can link them together. So you could, like you were talking about, this is somehow detecting it's the first time this person's logged in, kick them over to a page that auto starts a kind of an onboarding tour. And this onboarding tour could show them around your account. And could point up to the top bar. Here's where your content is. And you can have buttons inside your tips that link to that page, like your managed content page, with $tour at the end. So it could be like, here's where you go in to manage your content. Take that tour now, or continue. Here's where you go in to add users. Take that tour now, or continue. Each one of those buttons just goes to that area with auto starting its tour. So it's pretty workable, yeah.
I'm kind of curious. You said that it's configured to the YAML file. How does the content of the HTIP get built? Is it in the YAML file? And can they accept HTML? Can they accept any tags?
It's whatever tags could be in a paragraph in HTML. I don't think I'm using the right term for that, but it is HTML, but it's not any HTML. Like,
break tags and bold tags.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just formatting stuff.
Yeah.
So if you do like videos, is what I was thinking. Because I shared with everything you're talking about, this stuff that I had in the car ready to go for this client that I'm working on, and it kept getting pushed back. And it was
It's hard. It's really hard to convey the value of something like this, and it's tricky if it's not part of the project that it's going to be a continued relationship. But I think if it's for something like a university or a government organization or a larger nonprofit, where they can see the value in continuously improving the product for the users, and I think you stand a chance at thinking this way. But yeah, you can right. So you could like make a GIF. Like this could be in a tour tip, right? So like the tour tip could point at the title, and then this is just a silly example, but say you type in the title here, and even while that tip's up, they could type in the title while it's there because it's just a JavaScript tip or whatever. So I have a demo that doesn't match up with the slides, but let's actually look at that. I don't know if it's going to load. So this is actually a tour. This tour, I originally had in that other slide. I originally had the demo going into the second tip of the tour. So this auto starts the tour at what is the second tip. But now this second tip, it's all changed. I changed further things, and then I didn't fix it for the presentation, but it doesn't matter. But here, so I'm on a content type right now, and the content type has a tour configured for it. And if I go to that node, add content type, the content type is called service details, and I have question mark tour at the end, it will just start the tour. So this is just for demo purposes, but you probably have some CSS so that this thing shows up in a little bit of a better place. But the tour when there's a tour available for a page, you end up with this tour area. It starts and can start and stop it. So one of the first things you might want to show your user as you're onboarding them onto the website in general, that your first tip could be, hey, this is where you start and stop tours when, up here in the corner, that's where you start and stop tours when they're available. But this over here, here's a tip of what's new on this page. So anytime you have a release, a new feature release, part of that code deployment could include updating the what's new tips, the YAML for the what's new tips. So then anytime a user starts a tour on a page, they get the newest thing. And it could include a GIF. You can extend tour reasonably to have like YouTube embeds. You could have a button here. This example button is see all of what's new. The see all of what's new could go to a page that you have where you document the version history of your releases. So anytime you do a release, you just add those new release notes to that page, and you can link people off to that whole page in a tour. Here's the next tip, talking about how pointing out that some stuff is required, and that these tabs have required sections in them, and you can build out as much content in here as you want. Just letting people know where stuff is and how to use it. You don't have to necessarily let them know how to use it. Just letting them know where it is and the importance of it, and then you can include like a see more help here that could go to a more detailed page about using whatever that new feature is. This is an example of, so if you think about the tour module, you're kind of thinking of yourself as maybe you're visiting your customer and you don't want them to have to scan the page and hunt and peck for things. You can say, up here are the tabs in this particular content type, very important, there's required stuff. And over here to your right is we've added some extra features in here to do some special things. So you're really, guiding them around the page so that they don't have to feel like they're looking and potentially wasting their time. I think this is a time-saving user experience as well. So here's an example of an idea where, maybe you want to know what this page looks like when you save it. And if you're using like a pattern library or something, you could link to that example area or that example page. Or you could just link to a page that's in production. Just to say like, hey, when you submit this stuff, here's what you're going to see. And so you can see how you can have multiple buttons. You can just use the button class to get this one. This end tour one is showing up because this is tip 6 of 6. So that's, yes?
Quickly, you mentioned if you're using a pattern library.
Yep.
What do you mean by that specifically?
Well, so like Pattern Lab, or there are a number of component libraries that are coming out.
Okay.
And so this is the idea that you have your kind of display templating information separate, and you can call in that you can have somebody working on and building your pattern library independent of knowing how it works in the Drupal templating system.
Okay, that was a clarification.
Yep. It's also part of a larger theory, really cool thinking just a pattern thinking in general, and kind of like removing the kind of one-off thinking from our development and design theory. So if you have a pattern library in place, it can be really nice whenever you have a new feature to look at the pattern library to think, what pieces of this can I assemble together to build this new feature? Rather than saying, hey design, can you make me a whole new bespoke landing page that we're going to need a new template to implement? All right. So let's see what the rest of these slides have. I feel like I kind of went ahead of them a little bit. Yeah, right. So you could guide them through their account. You get this ugly Drupal email, and you click on let's log in now to the site, and you put in your password, and you log in, and you go through kind of like an account tour. Actually, I think you have that too. So if I go to we've got a tour here. Welcome. So excited to begin this journey. Let's get started. So this would be like, here's where the tours are. Obviously, some CSS should bump this tip down. Let's add some content. So you can continue on the tour, or maybe that's what you're interested in, is adding content. This goes to your node add page, configured to auto start the tour. So we've just linked to another separate tour, but auto started it. And it explains a little bit about here's where you add content types. You can end the tour to add some content types, or you can see an example, and this links to a content type. And we've already been on this tour. But here's an example content type taking the tour. What's new on this page? And we just did that in the other demo. So that's really this idea of communicating with the customers, educating your customers on the product. What is this slide about? Let's see. So out of the box, tour has tips, and the tips have kind of a content model to them that's very basic. Each tip has a title and a body, and it can contain HTML. And so one thing that could happen to build this into your development process, a new idea or a new feature or something is going to start to materialize, and as a product owner, you can start thinking, okay, would this feature make sense to be added to a tour? Is this going to show up in a new, strange location on the page? Is this something people have been clamoring for? So if you start to think, okay, yeah, this feature would make sense to have a tip associated with it, you can write that title and that body for that tip before the feature is even done, right? It can start to be like, this is going to be accepted when this tip exists and the things that the tip says in it are true. So you can have that information, you can generate that content, and that whole issue, that whole feature can be developed, and that tip, the development of that tip becomes a part of the development of that feature. Let's see. So just in case anybody's curious, the YAML kind of looks like this. Development, if you're writing the tour tips as YAML, you'll need to determine group in Drupal. I don't do a lot of development anymore, but I just looked in the database and matched the URL to the root. But if you're a product owner, you just need to provide some URLs of where this tour should show up, and development can figure out what the appropriate route is. The way that tips know how to show up are the classes of the thing that they're showing up near. So you determine that. And that gets matched up with the content that goes along with the feature, and gets installed and deployed as part of the whole thing. So that's more of oh, right. So this last bullet point isn't 100% related to everybody, but JIRA lets you do releases and has release notes, and it might fit your workflow to just finally do something with those release notes. You can copy paste them into a what's new tour tip that shows up. Okay. Another idea, in addition to using Tor to communicate with our customers, is thinking about contextual guides and resources on site features. So this would be like help text or help articles. Let's see, what is this slide all about? So if you theme your user landing page when they log in, this is actually an example of, the release notes block could just show up when the user logs in and get updated periodically as part of updating other things. And you could have like a user dashboard or a user landing page that could link off to what are all the tours. You can file a support ticket. So really using Drupal, you can use Drupal very easily to make it into a product experience like a lot of us are having more and more with the products that we use. So let's see. So if you do one idea that I'm working on is if you do use a content type for help pages, that's really this is kind of like help information for a content type, and this could be a help page or information coming from a help page, and you could replace your add content page with a view of help pages that are just for specific content types. And so this could just be a grid view. So rather than bending over backwards and customizing Drupal's core node add page, you could build a view of your help pages that are about each content type and really use all that Drupal goodness to show maybe a screenshot of the page. Because basically in a help page, if you write a help page for a content type, you're talking about all this stuff. And since you can designate what content type the help page is for, you could have a link that is for creating that help page. So you can really just use Drupal's site building, the power of its site building features to build some of these pages that are more informational and can replace some of Drupal core's administration pages. So that's one idea with making an add content page by using a Drupal help page content type. And just to break this down a little bit more, so if this is like maybe a teaser view or a field view, or this is one piece of content in a view that are showing the fields styled nicely. You could have as part of that help page content type, anything that you can have a field for. So you can have a field for actually it would know what content type it's for, and you could theme in or configure in views a link to that content type that auto starts the tour. So you could write out some key components to that content type, and then it could link to that content type auto starting the tour that kind of shows where on the page those key components are. Viewing a live example, you can enter in a URL for a live page on the site that represents that. And here could be maybe a link to the full page that has a full description of all the fields and everything, or it could link to a kind of maybe a parent if you're using the book module. These help pages could be part of the book module, and you could link to a parent section for help pages that relate to that content type. Really, if you're making your help pages content type, you can do all the things you can do with Drupal to categorize them and relate them and group them and link them. So it can be a really powerful way to just using Drupal and site building to educate your users of the site so that they can use the site better. And then you have those inroads made for whenever a feature is changed. They're you basically interacting with your help pages as they're using the whole setup. So anytime you add something new, to let them, the best way then becomes to let them know about that new thing is to update that help page information. So you're kind of updating your insight documentation as a way to both keep it updated, but as a way to get that update in their path, because this idea has them using your help pages just to use the site. So that's just an idea there. Does anybody have any Anybody have any thoughts, like how maybe you would tweak this idea to make it better? Anybody thinking about things you could do with Drupal to kind of like have a relationship with your operators of your product through the product that they're using? So it's kind of a really cool opportunity that to find yourself in, where you're an expert in Drupal and you can use Drupal as the relationship point between you and your users.
Yeah, I think this will be really helpful as we migrate from D7 to D8.
Yeah.
Give that tour, because it's going to be different.
Yeah. Yep. We want. They're using the product. I think a lot of this thinking stems from if you're thinking about agility and recognizing reality and adjusting course to always try to stay on the right course and continuously improve. You start to crave these indicators of what's real for people, and so that's more than just whether the server's up or not. So you're thinking like, how are people experiencing my work? And I want that information, whether it's good or it's bad or it might take a little effort to think about, because I want to know, because I want to keep improving. And so a lot of these ideas stem from that thinking, where it's like, how can I best set up these feedback loops so that I can get this information that I need to keep improving my product. So one of the out-of-the-box ways to communicate with your users is the built-in help text in fields. How are we doing on time? What is this on? 10. Oh, minutes over? Oh, okay. All right. Well, we can end at any point, because really just the basic idea is that your users are using the thing you're an expert in, and you can use that expertise to use all the tools. And one of the reasons why we've chosen Drupal is because it's so powerful in that way that we can configure it, and we can. It's flexible in and of itself to be able to keep providing this information. But one of the built-in ways is help text. This tooltip pop-up, this question mark thing, is an add-on module called like help tip or something. But if you don't have a help tip, then this information would just live underneath this field. But you can describe the fields as part of the field, and then the help is in context for the people that are using it. You can link off to other help pages. Let's just see what the rest of these slides are in the last 2 minutes. I had this further idea to make the help text more of a piece of content, so you can really describe out what each field is, and you could have like a summary, and the summary could be what shows for the help text, but the body, the longer form help context for each field could get used later. And where that would get used later would be in a help page content type, where you could have the standard help page content stuff like title, subtitle, image, and other relations like which content type this is for. But then you could have some magic, right? Because if you relate it to the content type, we're doing some of this work. This is custom, and we'll release the sandbox at some point soon. But there could be some magic here if the help page content type knows what content type it's for, it knows what fields are in that content type, and it knows what help text you've configured for each field. So it could, you could have your help field, the help text for each field look something like this, where there's long form WYSIWYG content and a summary. And the magic would be, whenever you view a help page, it automatically pulls in each field's help text, long form, right? So you can automatically build these help pages for these content types. And I think a lot of API documentation works this way. So that would be a cool, that's what we're working on right now, is you like turn on Drupal help system. And then all you do is fill in all the help text. And then what you get after you fill in all the help text are these automatically created help pages for each of your content types. So anytime you add a feature, remove a field, or change a field, you update its help content, and then that would change the help page. So went kind of through that kind of briefly. You can use the book as the knowledge base. You can build a help center with panels. You can use flags to know if content is useful or not. And so really building a culture of closeness and open collaboration with our customers, expanding and completing more fully that DevOps feedback loop. And I'm going to end it now since I'm out of time and say thank you.
Thank you.